When you hear Mandalorian, your brain probably jumps straight to the cool armor, the jetpacks, and that mysterious T-shaped visor. But if we stop there, we're only scratching the surface. What really makes a Mandalorian isn't the armor, it's the code, a creed, a way of life, a set of values that's held an entire culture together for thousands of years, even through wars, betrayals, and the near total destruction of their homeworld. So here's the question: what can we learn from it? And why has this warrior ethos survived when so much else in Star Wars has been shattered and rewritten? This is the way. You've heard Din Djarin say it 100 times by now, but the phrase isn't just a catchphrase. It's shorthand for an entire worldview. The Mandalorian Code, in its many forms, has always emphasized loyalty, honor, survival, and unity through strength. And just like with the Jedi Code, there isn't one official version. Different clans, different eras, even different Mandalores, that's their word for supreme leader, have interpreted it differently. For Din and the Children of the Watch, the code literally means never removing the helmet in front of others. For Bo-Katan and the more modern Mandalorians, the code is about preserving their people, even if traditions evolve. And if you go back to the days of Tare Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi, the code was about reconciling a people of war with the discipline of the Force. What's fascinating here is the elasticity of the creed. It bends without breaking. And that's probably why, despite centuries of civil wars and even the Empire's purge of Mandalore, the code still survives. Mandalorians have always been known as some of the galaxy's fiercest warriors. The Clone Wars showed us armies of jetpack-clad fighters who could go toe-to-toe with Jedi. But here's the twist: the code doesn't glorify violence for its own sake. It glorifies honor in battle and unity in purpose. Think about Din Djarin's journey. At the start, he's a lone bounty hunter, following the code mainly out of ritual. But over time, he learns that the real meaning of the Mandalorian way isn't about solitude. It's about belonging. His bond with Grogu, his loyalty to his covert, and eventually his willingness to fight for Mandalore's future alongside Bo-Katan, all of that comes straight from the code's deeper principle: your clan is your life. That resonates beyond Star Wars. Strip away the sci-fi setting, and what we're looking at is a philosophy that says strength means nothing if you're alone. Let's zoom out. In Star Wars lore, Mandalorians date back thousands of years long before the Skywalker saga. Legends materials, like the Knights of the Old Republic, comics and novels, describe Mandalorians as a nomadic warrior people who would adopt outsiders into their culture. That's important. Mandalorians weren't defined by species, but by commitment to the creed. Twi'leks, humans, Zabraks, anyone could be a Mandalorian if they lived the code, and that principle has carried through to modern canon. Din Djarin himself is a foundling, adopted after his family was killed during the Clone Wars. Grogu, though not officially a Mandalorian yet, is also being raised as a foundling. This tradition of choosing family and forging bonds through shared honor makes Mandalorians one of the most inclusive yet demanding societies in Star Wars. In other words, they're not just warriors, they're builders of identity. Now, here's where it gets juicy. The Mandalorian code often clashes with the rest of the galaxy. The Jedi value peace and serenity. Mandalorians value strength and resolve. The Empire demanded obedience. Mandalorians demanded freedom. Even among themselves, different factions have interpreted the creed in ways that sparked bloody civil wars. Bo-Katan Kryze's entire arc is a study in how codes evolve. Early on in the Clone Wars, she followed Death Watch, a group that twisted the code into a justification for terror and conquest. Later, she realized the code could mean something greater: unity and leadership, not domination. By the time we see her in The Mandalorian, she's wrestling with what it means to reclaim Mandalore not just as a planet, but as a people bound by creed. That tension, the push and pull between rigid tradition and necessary adaptation, is exactly what makes Mandalorian culture so fascinating. Here's the real kicker. The Mandalorian code is fictional, but it taps into something deeply human. We all live by codes, whether we admit it or not. Sometimes it's religious, sometimes cultural, sometimes just personal values. And just like the Mandalorians, we struggle with the same questions. Do we hold to tradition, even when the world changes? Do we bend the rules for survival? Do we risk unity for personal freedom, or sacrifice individuality for the greater good? Din Djarin, Bo-Katan, Sabine Wren, they all wrestle with these choices, and that's why their stories feel so relatable. The code isn't about rules carved in stone, it's about identity forged in fire. So, why does the Mandalorian code still hit so hard with fans decades after it was first introduced in Star Wars lore? Because it's a mirror. It reflects back at us the timeless struggle between honor and survival, between tradition and change. This is the way has become a meme, sure, but it's also become a mantra. A reminder that no matter how chaotic the galaxy or our own world gets, there's power in belonging, honor in keeping your word, and strength in standing with your clan. Din and Grogu might just be two unlikely warriors traveling the galaxy, but their bond, their choices, and their adherence to the way have turned them into something more. Symbols of how a creed can transform not just individuals, but entire cultures. And that's why the Mandalorian code is more than a gimmick. It's a living philosophy, one that continues to evolve every time a new Mandalorian lifts their helmet and says, "This is the way." It's not just a line, it's an entire worldview. But where did it actually come from? Was it born in the fires of Mandalorian conquest? Or was it something more ancient, more spiritual, that got buried under centuries of war and politics? Today, we're digging deep into the origins of the Mandalorian Creed, those unifying principles that turn scattered warrior clans into one of the most feared, respected, and mysterious cultures in the galaxy. Long before Din Djarin ever walked the galaxy in Beskar, Mandalore wasn't a united planet. It was a patchwork of clans, houses like Vizsla, Kryze, Rook, and Wren. Each one was proud, fiercely independent, and constantly fighting for dominance. The earliest Mandalorians weren't just warriors, they were conquerors. Legends tell us they didn't even start as humans. In fact, some sources in Knights of the Old Republic point back to the Tauang, an ancient warrior species who first settled on Mandalore after being driven from Coruscant. Now think about that. Their entire cultural DNA was built on exile, survival, and reclaiming identity through strength. That's why combat, honor, and loyalty to clan were never just values. They were survival mechanisms. But here's the key. Those fractured loyalties couldn't last forever. Because when you've got dozens of clans constantly warring, you eventually realize something bigger has to bind you together. And that's where the seeds of the creed were planted. Here's where it gets fascinating. Early Mandalorians weren't only about brute force. They began developing rules of conduct, a kind of warrior code. Some of the oldest texts we have, like the Canons of Honor, suggested that victory wasn't enough. You had to fight with purpose. This is echoed later in The Mandalorian, when the armorer reminds Din Djarin that to walk the way isn't just about wearing armor, it's about loyalty, sacrifice, and discipline. And then comes a crucial turning point in history. Mandalore the First, and later figures like Mandalore the Ultimate, started to unite clans under a single identity. They forged more than political unity, they crafted a spiritual one. The Creed wasn't a single written document, it evolved out of necessity. The message: we are stronger together, we survive together, this is the way. Let's pause for a second. Why does "this is the way" feel so profound? Because it's ritualistic. It's like a mantra, repeated across generations, drilled into every Mandalorian from foundling to warrior. It's not an explanation, it's a statement of faith. George Lucas himself always talked about how Star Wars was a mythology, not just a story. And mythology thrives on phrases that sound simple but carry immense weight. Think of "May the Force be with you." It's the Jedi equivalent. For the Mandalorians, "this is the way" is more than a rulebook. It's a reminder that every choice, every sacrifice, every battle connects to something bigger. In the Clone Wars, when we meet Duchess Satine Kryze and the pacifist New Mandalorians, we actually see the other side of this. The warrior creed had splintered. Some saw the way as constant combat. Others tried to reinterpret it as peace. But even then, the phrase survived. Why? Because the way is adaptable. It's not frozen in time. It's lived and relived by every generation. Now let's name drop a few legends. Mandalore the Ultimate. He turned the Creed into a rallying cry for galactic conquest. Under his rule, the Mandalorians nearly broke the Republic during the Mandalorian Wars. His version of the way was about strength above all. Tari Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi. Think about how radical that was. He embodied a different vision of the Creed, balance. He forged the Darksaber, not just as a weapon, but as a unifying symbol. His story shows that the Creed wasn't only about violence. It could embrace spirituality, even the Force itself. The Armorer, fast forward to Din Djarin's era, and you have the Armorer acting as the keeper of the Creed. She interprets it, she enforces it, and she reminds the scattered remnants of what it means to be Mandalorian. In a way, she's a priest as much as a smith. Each of these figures adapted the Creed to their times. And that's the secret. It's not static. It's a living code, hammered and reforged, just like their Beskar armor. So, why has the Mandalorian Creed lasted thousands of years when so many galactic governments, empires, and Jedi orders have crumbled? Because it's not based on politics, it's based on identity. Think of it like this. The Jedi Code is about serving others. The Sith Code is about serving yourself. The Mandalorian Creed, it's about serving the tribe, the clan, the people. That makes it incredibly resilient. Even when Mandalore was bombed to glass by the Empire, even when the clan scattered across the Outer Rim, the way survived in whispers, in traditions, in foundlings like Din. This is the way. Reminds every Mandalorian that their armor isn't just protection, it's heritage. Their weapons aren't just tools, they're symbols of survival. And their code isn't just words, it's the bloodline that connects past, present, and future. So the next time you hear Din Djarin say, "This is the way," remember, it's not just a catchphrase for the show. It's the echo of millennia of history, of warriors and philosophers, of victories and defeats, all condensed into 4 words. And here's the kicker. If history has shown us anything, it's that the Creed will keep evolving. From Tari Vizsla to Bo-Katan to Grogu, every generation redefines what the way means. Which begs the question, what's the next chapter? Is the way about war, about peace, or about something entirely new? Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's this. The Creed isn't just Mandalorian history. The Creed is Mandalore. But beyond the helmet, there's something far more important. The code. It's not just a set of rules, it's a way of life. Today, we're breaking down the core tenets of Mandalorian culture. Loyalty, family, honor, and duty. And how these values actually play out in a galaxy filled with chaos, betrayal, and endless wars. Let's start with loyalty. For Mandalorians, loyalty isn't just about swearing allegiance to a leader. It's about a bond that transcends personal gain. Din Djarin is the perfect modern example. When he first accepts the job to deliver the asset, Grogu, he sees it as just another bounty, a paycheck. But when he realizes what the Imperials intend to do with the child, his loyalty shifts. Suddenly, he's not just a mercenary, he's a protector. That single choice transforms his life. And this theme isn't new. Going back to legends, Mandalorian loyalty was famously described in Karen Travis's Republic Commando novels. Mandalorians stood by each other like family, even welcoming outsiders into their ranks. The saying went, Aliat Orisha Taladin, family is more than blood. In other words, loyalty defines family, not genetics. But loyalty can also create conflict. Take Bo-Katan cries. Her loyalty to Mandalore itself sometimes clashes with her loyalty to individuals. She allied with Darth Maul to defeat Death Watch leadership, only to later reject his rule when it became clear he was using Mandalore for his own ends. Her story shows how Mandalorians wrestle with the gray areas, when loyalty to one cause may betray another. Now let's talk about family. For Mandalorians, the word family doesn't always mean biological parents and children. Instead, it's the clan, the tribe, the covert. Din Djarin is once again our anchor. He was a foundling rescued by Mandalorians during the Clone Wars. His biological parents were gone, but the tribe raised him as one of their own. That's why he feels such a deep connection to Grogu, because he sees himself reflected in the child. When he takes Grogu under his wing, he's continuing that same cycle. This practice of adopting foundlings is one of the most unique elements of Mandalorian culture. It's both practical and symbolic. On a practical level, Mandalorians often suffered huge losses in war, so adoption helped rebuild numbers. But on a symbolic level, it reinforced the belief that Mandalorian identity is earned, not inherited. You could be born anywhere, but if you follow the creed, you are Mandalorian. Even in the animated series Rebels, we see this through Sabine Wren. Her biological family is still around, but her real family becomes the Ghost Crew. Ezra, Hera, Zeb, and Kanan, they embody the Mandalorian understanding of Elite. And here's where it gets interesting. Family isn't always harmonious. Sabine struggles when her family sides with the Empire. Din faces conflict with his covert when he breaks the creed by removing his helmet. Family gives strength, but it also challenges loyalty, forcing Mandalorians to constantly redefine what Elite really means. Next up, honor. This one might sound old-fashioned, but for Mandalorians, it's central. Honor is the glue that binds loyalty and family into something larger than themselves. The most obvious symbol of honor? The Darksaber. The Darksaber, forged by Tari Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi, the blade isn't just a weapon, it's a test of worthiness. Whoever wields it has a claim to rule Mandalore, but only if they win it in combat. That rule exists because honor demands it. You can't just accept the blade as a gift. Bo-Katan learned this the hard way when she accepted it from Sabine. Many Mandalorians refused to follow her afterward because honor wasn't satisfied. But honor isn't just about leadership, it's about personal conduct. Din lives by this. Even when bounty hunting, he follows a code. He refuses to break promises, even if it costs him dearly. Think of the episode in The Mandalorian Season 1, where he helps defend the village from raiders. There's no huge payout, but protecting innocence aligns with his sense of honor. Contrast this with characters who abandon honor. Pre Vizsla, leader of Death Watch, claimed to fight for Mandalorian tradition, but his actions, alliances with the Separatists and terrorists showed his hunger for power outweighed true honor. It's a recurring lesson in Mandalorian history. Dishonor corrodes unity, while honor, though costly, sustains the way. Finally, we reach duty. Duty is the hardest part of the Mandalorian code because it never ends. For Din, duty takes the form of protecting Grogu. Even after completing his contract, even after facing exile from his covert, he cannot abandon the child. That's duty. It persists when convenience and profit say otherwise. In broader Mandalorian history, duty often meant serving as mercenaries. Entire clans hired themselves out as soldiers for galactic conflicts. But here's the twist. What outsiders saw as mercenary work, Mandalorians saw as fulfilling duty to clan survival. Fighting was their way of life. There's also the spiritual layer. This is the way. That phrase embodies duty. It's both a mantra and a reminder. It means sacrifice. It means putting the creed above personal comfort. And sometimes, it means suffering for it. Din loses his covert. Bo-Katan loses her planet. Sabine loses her family ties. But through it all, duty gives them meaning. So, when you strip away the helmet, what do you find? Loyalty that binds warriors together. Family that transcends blood. Honor that defines their worth. And duty that keeps them walking forward no matter the cost. The Mandalorian code isn't perfect. It clashes with reality. It causes inner turmoil, and it sometimes drives people apart. But it's precisely that tension which makes it so powerful. It asks a question every Mandalorian has to answer for themselves. What does it mean to walk the way? And maybe that's why this culture resonates with us so much as fans. In a galaxy of shifting allegiances and endless wars, the code offers clarity. It's not about blasters or jetpacks. It's about living with conviction. So the next time you hear Din Djarin whisper, "This is the way," remember, those aren't just words. They're a promise.